The city's COVID caseload eases slightly to below 10,000. A nurse is jailed for faking vaccinations to issue vaccination records. And U.S. prosecutors move to drop charges against Meng Wanzhou. Good evening and thanks for joining us. After breaking the 10,000 mark yesterday, the city's daily COVID caseload fell slightly to 9,996 new infections today. 11 more patients have succumbed to the virus, bringing the city's death toll since the fifth wave of the pandemic to 10,560. 9,359 of the new infections were locally acquired. Among them, 7 infections carried the XBB mutant strain, while 4 others were detected to have the BQ.1.1 subvariant. 21 COVID cases were reported across 15 care homes for the elderly and the disabled. 11 schools each have to suspend 1 in-person class, which reported multiple infections for 1 week. A nurse who faked vaccinations to issue vaccination records for 6 people has been sentenced to jail for 6 months. The incident occurred at the Kowloon-based sports center at the beginning of the year. The 34-year-old female nurse pleaded guilty to 2 counts of conspiracy to defraud. Meanwhile, 3 women who received the fake jabs were given between 2 to 3 months of jail time. The judge said as the incidents happened at the height of the pandemic, the punishments needed to be harsher in order to prevent such acts from damaging the public healthcare system in the future. With Hong Kong's daily COVID caseload surpassing 10,000 once again, some infectious disease specialists estimated that infection numbers in the city will peak in 2 weeks' time. Calling upon the elderly to take a 5th coronavirus jab, the Scientific Committee on Vaccine-Preventable Diseases suggested that the 5th wave will help the senior population better handle the virus over the course of the winter. Timothy Lee reports.
As the November breeze shifts to the winter chills of December, many are increasingly concerned about the development of the city's pandemic situation. But some infectious disease specialists believe that the trend of about 10,000 cases per day will see a drop after 2 weeks. Dr. Leung Chi-Chu, an expert in respiratory disease, said cases involving several variants of COVID-19 have already been on the decline. He added that cases involving the new mutant strains only accounted for around 2% of all infections. Leung noted that the main cause of the current COVID rebound, the largest in the last 3 months, was the weakening of the immune system of residents towards the virus, saying that booster shots are necessary to rebuild immunity. In a bid to increase vaccination rates across the city, the Center for Health Protection's Scientific Committee on Vaccine-Preventable Diseases suggested that those aged 18 or above who have received the 4th jab or taken 3 jabs in addition to having previously been infected could get their 5th vaccination more than 6 months after their last jab. The committee said residents could choose either the Omicron-targeted bivalent vaccine or its predecessors for the 5th jab. Care home residents and those with weak immunity will have the interval between their previous and 5th vaccination shortened to 3 months. Double-jabbed care home residents have the option to choose the bivalent vaccine as their 3rd jab.
We encourage the subjects, anyone above the age of 18, to get the bivalent vaccine if they want to do so. And the recommendation is especially targeted for those who are in the elderly homes, who are above the age of 60, so-called elderly, and those who are so-called have chronic illnesses. We suggest these subjects to get vaccinated with the bivalent vaccine 3 months from the last dose of booster, at least 3 months, or from the at least 3 months from the past infection. Even though we do not have data right now, it's likely to confer a better clinical protection in these high-risk individuals.
Hung stressed that possible side effects of the bivalent vaccine are similar to its predecessor, including partial discomfort, pain at the injection site, and fever. But he added that residents could experience more intense side effects if they get the bivalent vaccine after having been previously injected with other vaccine brands. Timothy Lee, TVB News.
The mainland's latest daily COVID tally stayed at around 35,000 cases. This as the mainland signaled a slight easing of COVID restrictions and quarantine rules after protests in some mainland cities and universities. A trickle of changes surrounding the mainland's COVID controls have raised hopes that a broader relaxation could be on the way. This as the central government called for further efforts to optimize COVID measures and minimize the disruption to people's daily lives. They include a swift imposition and lifting of lockdowns. Making adjustments in lockstep, various municipal governments updated their approach to tackling outbreaks. Shanghai lifted lockdown measures in 24 districts deemed high risk for COVID transmission. Similar moves to ease restrictions in Chongqing. For 2 days in a row, Vice Premier Sun Chunlan said the country is facing a new situation and new tasks in epidemic prevention and control as the Omicron virus weakens in transmissibility. There was no mention of the zero COVID policy in her speech. The looser measures were welcomed by mainland residents frustrated by 3 years of COVID curbs.
The government's finally recognized or realized that people or those voices from people, so they had to do something.
The vice premier stressed the need to boost the country's immunization rates against COVID, especially among the elderly. This as Guangdong reported 7,792 cases. The bulk of them were reported in its provincial capital, Guangzhou. So the city will allow most restaurants to resume dine-in services. Entertainment venues there can gradually reopen. Jackie Lin, TVB News. People in Hong Kong and on the mainland continue to mourn the death of former President Jiang Zemin, who passed away on Wednesday at the age of 96. More countries are sending their condolences, including Britain, the US, and India. It's day 2 of the memorial service for former President Jiang Zemin at Beijing's liaison office in Hong Kong. A contingent of politicians came to pay their last respects. They include current and former delegates to the National People's Congress Standing Committee. The memorial hall will be open till next Tuesday. Advance booking is required for entry, and mourners have to wear an N95 or a mask of higher protection to enter the hall. Today, among the latest countries to express condolences over Jiang's death was Britain's ambassador to China, Caroline Wilson. She said Jiang was the first Chinese leader to have visited the UK. She remarked Jiang had overseen the return of Hong Kong to China and China's entry to the World Trade Organization in 2001. Wilson noted Jiang was born in 1926, the same year as Queen Elizabeth, who died in September. In a tweet, America's envoy to China, Nicholas Burns, said Jiang had worked to advance U.S.-China ties at a consequential time while managing their differences, an imperative that continues today. The then Chinese leader visited the U.S. twice during his tenure, riding out an uneasy period in China's relations with the West following the June 4th incident in 1989. One of Jiang's visits to the U.S. was at George W. Bush's farm in Texas in 2002. A similar online gesture made by the Indian embassy in Beijing. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un also expressed deep condolences. Its state media reported Kim's remark on Jiang's support towards North Korea's socialist cause and Jiang's contributions to the two countries' relations. Also sending their condolences were leaders from countries including Cuba, Brunei, Maldives, Kazakhstan, and Belarus. U.S. prosecutors have asked a judge to dismiss bank fraud and other charges against Meng Wanzhou, the chief financial officer of China's Huawei Technologies. Her 2018 arrest strained relations between the U.S. and China. Meng struck a deal with the prosecutors last year for the charges against her to be dismissed on December 1, 2022, 4 years from the date of her arrest in Canada on a U.S. warrant. Part of the deal to defer prosecution included that she acknowledged she made false statements about the company's Iran business in a 2013 meeting with bank executives. Back locally, the government has commenced a 3-month public consultation exercise for the 6 new road and rail projects unveiled in the policy address. In the Legislative Council meeting today, some lawmakers questioned the necessity of land reclamation to build the southern extension of the Chengquan line. This as they worried pollution could affect nearby residents. Highways Department Director Jimmy Chan said there will be protective measures at the sea to minimize the environmental damage. Other lawmakers also questioned the need to build the Chengquan-Yaotong Tunnel, the 3rd road tunnel in the district. The transport chief Lam Sai-hung said the government will consider various suggestions before finalizing the developmental blueprint. In the meeting, authorities also revealed the Hong Kong section of the Hong Kong-Shenzhen Western Rail Link connecting Hung Shui Kiu and Qianhai will be 8 kilometers long. A new station will be located at Lau Fao Shan. Coming up after the break, French and U.S. presidents are united in supporting Ukraine. U.S. shoppers are expected to spend big despite inflation. The URA announces new project in West Hong Kong Island. Welcome back. Russian shelling has cut off power in the recently liberated Ukrainian city of Kherson. This just days after electricity was restored, causing locals to flee the area for safety. Ukraine's presidential office said at least 2 civilians were killed and 6 others wounded nationwide by the latest Russian shelling. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky marked the 31-year anniversary of the referendum unifying Ukrainian regions after the collapse of the Soviet Union. He also announced a government initiative to ban all religious organizations with ties with the Russian Orthodox Church. Suspicious packages have been found in Spain and the U.S. in locations related to supporters of the two sides of the war between Ukraine and Russia, although no direct link to the conflict has been established so far. A suspicious package was discovered at the Russian embassy in Washington, D.C. on Thursday night. This comes as police in Spain detonated a suspicious envelope delivered to the U.S. embassy in Madrid. Daniel Rao tells us more.
Police and the emergency medical services were called to the Russian embassy in Washington, D.C. on Thursday night after a suspicious package was found on the grounds of the embassy. Footage circulating on social media showed fire trucks and police vehicles arriving on the premises. A bomb squad and hazardous material crews were also on hand. Local media reports said an investigation into the package is ongoing. Meanwhile, police in Spain detonated a suspicious envelope discovered at the U.S. embassy in Madrid. Spain's police said the detonated envelope contained substances similar to those used in pyrotechnics. The incident came a day after a similar delivery was sent to the Ukrainian embassy, addressed to the country's ambassador to Spain, Serhiy Pohodeltsev, which ignited upon opening and injured an employee. Spain's national court is investigating the incident as a suspected terror attack. Spanish police reported that other explosive envelopes were sent in the country over the past 2 days. Police said they were delivered to Spain's Defense Ministry, a European Union satellite center located at the Torrejón de Ardoz airbase outside Madrid, and to an arms factory in northeastern Spain that makes grenades sent to Ukraine. Authorities said a bomb squad also destroyed an explosive device that was dispatched by regular post to Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez on November 24th. Spanish authorities have yet to determine who is responsible for the letters or link them to the war in Ukraine. The Russian embassy in Madrid condemned the letter bombs, saying in a tweet that any threat or terrorist attack, especially those directed at diplomatic missions, are totally condemnable. Daniel Rell, TVB News.
French President Emmanuel Macron is on a 3-day visit to the United States after holding talks with U.S. President Joe Biden. The two leaders vowed to stand firm in support of Ukraine and its war against Russian aggression. Joe Biden also hosted an official state dinner at the White House for the French leader. This is the first state dinner under the Biden administration and the first since September 2019 due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Tracy Furness has more.
President Macron arrived in Washington on Tuesday for his second state visit to the United States since the French leader took office in 2017. The dinner was a crowning social event of a trip aimed at showing Biden's commitment to Washington's oldest ally.
France was our first ally, first country to fly the American flag after our revolution. And Frank hosted the first diplomatic post. Before, more than anything else, France has been our first friend.
We stand together, shoulder to shoulder, precisely to be entitled to say, at the same time, we the people, and liberté, égalité, fraternité.
Hosting more than 340 guests, including many celebrities, the event took place inside a large tent on the South Lawn. But the visit between the two leaders was not all champagne and camaraderie. Earlier in the day, they met in the Oval Office to discuss issues such as China's influence in the Indo-Pacific and European dismay over aspects of Biden's signature climate law. But Ukraine topped the agenda. They stood together in support of Ukraine as it defends its sovereignty and territorial integrity against Russian aggression.
Putin thinks that he can crush the will of all those opposed his imperial ambitions. But attacking civilian infrastructures in Ukraine, choking off energy to Europe to drive up prices, exacerbating the food crisis, that's hurting very vulnerable people, not just in Ukraine, but around the world. And he's not going to succeed. President Macron and I have resolved that we're going to continue working together to hold Russia accountable for their actions.
The state dinner comes in the middle of the Macron's three-day visit to the United States. Macron visited the NASA headquarters and Capitol Hill. He met with members of Congress and the Biden administration. The Macrons will end their visit in New Orleans. Tracy Furness, TVB News.
Despite high inflation and rising interest rates in the U.S., October saw the sharpest increase in consumer spending in 4 months. Heading into the holiday season, shoppers are hopeful that the Federal Reserve may ease up on rate hikes. This report from NBC News.
Just over 2 weeks till Hanukkah, 3 till Christmas, and the latest data suggests Americans are still spending, with 40-year high inflation continuing to ease. October consumer spending just out shows the biggest gain since June, even as families pay more for rent, food, and new cars. Retailers report nearly 200 million people flocked to stores from Thanksgiving through Cyber Monday. In Atlanta, Whitney and Joe Novak own Kazoo Toys and say shoppers are inflation sensitive but still buying.
We've had a good year. We're positive. I mean, we're keeping people employed. We're not concerned. Toy is one of those nice industries where we're not going to have the huge up and downs roller coaster of supply and demand. I mean, kids are always going to want toys.
Inflation in October running at 6%, slightly lower than September. Fed Chairman Jay Powell now says the Federal Reserve could soon slow the pace of its interest rate hikes aimed at taming inflation.
The time for moderating the pace of rate increases may come as soon as the December meeting.
That could mean a half-point rate hike in 2 weeks rather than another three-quarter-point hike. Meanwhile, gas prices are now averaging $3.47 a gallon, down 28 cents in a month. Third quarter GDP even stronger than first reported.
We're kind of like waiting for the recession like they were waiting for Godot. It hasn't happened yet. And each month that goes by, the economy proves itself to be more resilient. Consumers keep spending.
Back in Hong Kong, the Urban Renewal Authority started the statutory planning procedures for a redevelopment project involving Kwai Hang Street and Queen's Road West today. It's aiming to complete the project by around 2031 or 2032 and hopes to provide about 180 residential units. Timothy Lee reports.
Spanning 15 street numbers and involving around 80 property owners, the project's freezing survey got underway today. The project covers parts of Kwai Hang Street, Queen's Road West, and Sung Hing Lane. With an area of 1,200 square meters, the project site covers buildings that are 4 to 6 stories high, with an average age of 60, all of which are without elevators and in poor condition. The URA said about 100 households and 20 street floor shops are expected to be impacted by the project. Acquisition offers to property owners are expected to be made in the third quarter of 2024.
We will ask the independent valuer to do the assessment of the market value of the property. But with reference to the previous project, we are able to achieve about 80% before government resumption.
Upon its completion in 2031 or 2032, the URA expects the project to provide about 180 small and medium-sized residential units, with an additional 1,200 square meters for government and commercial use. The site is right next to another redevelopment project by the URA. More than 1,600 square feet of open space is expected to be created by the project, including an expansion of the Sung Hing Lane Children's Playground.
We adopt an integrated approach to carry out redevelopment and revitalization to provide new open space and uplift existing facility to meet community needs.
Information including details about the site plan and a social impact assessment report will be available to the public over the next 2 months. Timothy Lee, TVB News.
And that's the news. Thank you for watching.